Hi, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. Today, I have a really special guest. Her name is Nichols, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Anna, and let everyone know a little bit about who you are, and then we're going to go ahead and dive right in.
Hello, I'm really excited to be here. My name is Anna Nichols, and I am a holistic business coach and mindset mentor.
Great. I'm so excited that you're here today because all I like to do on every single podcast episode is provide different types of healing tools, tips, techniques, and things like that. So anybody who's ever been on this podcast listening as a guest, they all know that this is kind of the trajectory that I take. And I love having people that are different on my podcast because you can bring something to my listeners that not everyone has. And so this is brand new, and I think it's going to be super helpful. So first and foremost, because you work with business strategy, you work with subconscious healing, you help people create more income and more impact. So some people are going to want to know what does that have to do with emotional healing, right? Because the Emotional Abuse Recovery podcast has to do with healing from your emotional wounds and things like that. So what do you think? And how would you describe that?
So whether you've had a job or owned a business, there's so many things that have happened in our lives outside of the business job space, whether that is in our personal lives. I have had parents that came from another country. And so there was so much that I had to deal with from their experience. And then when I did have a corporate job, I actually was bullied by one of my superiors for a long period of time. And as I went through my own healing journey and discovered subconscious transformation and all of these different healing modalities, I saw that there was a point in my life where I wasn't going out for promotions that I thought I could have because I felt like I didn't deserve it, or I wasn't smart enough to have that. And then because my parents actually came from another country, they really inspired that entrepreneurial spirit in me. So I knew that I wanted to always run my own business. But when I finally started to think about it, I shut down completely, because this was a part of my life when I was not only dealing with this bullying, but having been almost put on the chopping block, made to not feel safe to be successful, not safe to be seen or use my voice to speak my truth. And there was a lot of work that had to go into healing myself from not only the things I've experienced in my professional life, but also things that I've experienced in my personal life. And now how I can see all of the different things that I've done on my subconscious healing journey has really allowed me then to take that business strategy and help people create businesses, help people really move forward in a way that they can not only deliver the outcome of their business, but impact people in a much more substantial way.
Wow, that's awesome. And I want to hear all about that. I want to hear more about your parents and them coming from another country. I want to hear more about the bullying aspect, because I think that a lot of people can resonate with this, right? Because especially when you are trying to do something in your life, right? We know, you and I know this, and a lot of my listeners know this now, that your thoughts, your subconscious beliefs create your emotions, right? And the way that you feel impacts your behavior, drives that behavior. So if you have limiting beliefs or things in your subconscious that are making you feel like that you're not good enough, or that you're not deserving, or that you'll never create a successful business, or you'll never be able to start a podcast or write a book, or start that business that you've always dreamed of, right? Or go back and get your master's degree, or, do anything, right? That all stems from the early programming, the things that happen to you, maybe like bullying, maybe like abuse, emotional abuse, and things like that we've experienced. So tell us a little bit about your early life, the story that sort of shaped you. Because I think that, a lot of people want to know a little bit more about who you are. Where did that come from, and how did that start to shape you into the person you are today?
So like I said, my parents are from Poland. So we had a really deep cultural connection, and there was many people in our community. So we stayed really connected to a small group of people. I, being a first generation American, was going to school in America and all of these different things. But at home, it was like I was living in a different world than the environment that I went to in my schools and with my friends. And part of that was the mindset that my parents came with, right? They came with very little money in their pocket to this country, didn't speak the language. And so there was a lot of scarcity and fear that they may or may not have intentionally put in my brain, but that programming really set the foundation of, I'm going to have to work really hard to make money in my life. It doesn't matter if I like the job that I have or the career that prospects that I have to do something that is safe and secure. And, putting myself out there is dangerous and things like that. So as I was growing up and my parents were doing everything they thought they could to support me becoming the best version of myself or provide more than they had, what I now looking back in that season of my life and realizing how much of the things that I learned from them were about trying to minimize the impact that I was creating, only because it was risky. It was scary to be putting yourself out there. They were entrepreneurs, which I think is interesting, and ran a business. And so I got to experience a lot of that myself. But it was fascinating how the way that they spoke and taught me was different than the actions that they themselves were taking.
Yeah. So that is really interesting because, I talk about programming a lot, and programming are all the things that we experience from the day that we're born, our childhood, our parenting, our friends, our teachers, the society we grew up in, the cultures, like in your case. So what do you think are some of the things that you hear most often as a mentor, as a coach? What are the things that you hear most often from people when they're struggling with trying to do something new? Because here's the thing, when we have been emotionally abused, we are really at a loss for self-worth and confidence. A lot of that's been stripped away by abusers and, narcissists and toxic people in our lives. So whether it happened in childhood or whether it happened in adulthood, it doesn't really matter, but it can limit you, right? So people want to know, how do I actually move myself from one point to another point? And a lot of people just think, oh, you just have to do it, right? You just have to get up there and you just have to take action and do it, which is a piece of it. But if you have these thoughts that are going in your mind on repeat, that's what actually is preventing you from moving yourself forward. So what are some of the things that you hear people say? Like, what are some of the limiting things that you might hear?
All the time I hear these women, specifically, I work with a lot of women that share this lack of self-worth. And the way that manifests is, like I said, not taking promotions, not putting themselves out there for jobs, and really sitting back. And I think that there's a cultural aspect, a societal aspect to that for women anyway. If you're a mother, there's these expectations of who you maybe are supposed to be or not supposed to be. And there's not really space created to allow you to explore those different parts. And one of the things that I often work with women through is, it is okay for you to say the dream that you have out loud, whether that's in your journal, right? Through subconscious reprogramming, we talk a lot about the act of writing and how that helps your brain reprogram the thoughts that you have. But I was recently working with a client. The first time I asked her, what vision do you have for your business? She whispered it under her breath and did this sort of laugh, which is a trauma response. And it's because even though she has started a business, she has been playing small because she's afraid to take that next step. And that's why she started working with me and recognizing that she needed to do something different if she wanted to achieve that dream.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting too, especially what you said, not taking promotions, sitting back. Like, what is it that drives that behavior? What is it? What are the things that somebody like her would be believing as to why she shouldn't go after that, or why she should sit back, or why she shouldn't go ask for the promotion, right? What would be some of the things that somebody like her would be thinking?
A lot of the time it's, I'm not smart enough. I don't have the education or the experience. I've heard lots of studies where women will not apply for a job unless they meet 100% of their criteria, and that men will often apply for a job if they even meet 25% of the criteria.
Wow.
So that is something that there's these pressures that have been put on women a lot of times to perform at a different level, or maybe that's that self doubt that has happened from thinking back to our school days. If you didn't pass a test or you got a bad grade in a certain subject, thinking I can't run a business because I'm not good at math. Or I didn't write well in high school, so how could I ever write my story in a book? And these different experiences from our past really shape the actions that we take going forward.
Yeah. So I totally hear that, because when I moved, from my abusive relationship to being on my own and, having to do the things that I wanted to do, like I really wanted to write my book, there was a lot of fear. There was a lot of doubt, right? There was a huge motivator also, because I really wanted to help people and I really wanted to get my story out there. So I think the motivator kind of superseded all of the self-doubt, because it was like, I just have to do this anyway. But there were things that were like, yeah, I was decent at writing in high school, and I didn't really write in college, and that wasn't my major, or like I didn't take any courses or classes, and I didn't have any like special, training in that. But I think the things that were limiting me before I ever started was, what are people going to think about it? And will people actually like it? And what if they hate it? And what if it fails? And like all of these things that were coming up as questions for me. Also for me to become a coach, just full disclosure here, like everybody has that like imposter syndrome that pops in. And I think that's what a lot of this is, when we're hearing this, and things that you're saying, is that people want to do these things. They have these big dreams, but they have these fears or these subconscious beliefs that are getting in the way. So what do you say to people like that? Like the people who are listening today, who want to go after something new, who want to, try something they've never tried before. They want to invest in themselves as far as like education or training or starting a business or anything really. What would you say to those people who are just like at a roadblock and don't know how to move?
What's really coming to mind here is part of my own story when I was in that moment. And I remember for maybe about 6 years, I had been dealing with my corporate boss, bullying me and having this dream of wanting to get out of that environment and start my own business. And the thoughts that kept going through my head were, who am I to go out there and help other people? And I was doing a good job at leading my team and doing things like that in the corporate world. But the people in positions of power, the people who were successful as my organization had defined it, made me feel like less than. And there was a moment, kind of like you talked about, that motivating factor. For me, I still didn't know what to do or how I was going to make it happen, but I had this deep calling inside of myself that I knew I wanted something different. And it was by finding a mentor, a coach, someone who I trusted to help me start unpacking that actually allowed me to kind of get over that hump, get past feeling stuck, because this mentor was the first one that not only helped me believe that it was possible to do what I wanted to do, but started to give me the steps on how to achieve it, which made that big dream seem more possible and really started the ball rolling on actually making it happen.
Yeah, that's amazing that you had somebody that, well, even that you thought, I need some support, right? Like I need support I have this calling, I want to do this, but I feel like this hesitation, I need support, and that you took the action, right? A lot of times, just taking that action and doing something can help us open up a whole lot of other possibilities. But I love when you said like, who am I to go help other people? And the thing that kept going through my head when you said that was, who are you not to? Right? Who are you
Mhm.
not to? Because what if, like, that's the one thing that I felt like for me, what if this act of writing my book, what if this act of taking the step to become a coach really impacts someone else's life, really helps someone, even if it's just one person? Who am I not to do that? Right? So if you look at it in a different light, like how you were saying that, and then it shifted, oh, I have this hesitation. Who am I? That imposter syndrome. You took some action, you got with a mentor, and then you were able to see things in a different way. So now you have the who am I not to, right? You're at that point now, because now you are helping other people. You are taking what you've experienced in your life and now mentoring other people and helping them in the same way. So I love that. I think that's amazing. And I'm really glad that you shared that. Many people want to do these things, right? I know people who are like, oh, I'm going to start a nonprofit to help women who've been abused. And I want to write my story, and I'm going to go back to law school and get these laws changed. There's a lot of people who, when you've been exposed to these toxic environments, when you've been physically, emotionally, financially, when the abuse has really just taken a toll on you, people hit rock bottom and they're ready to take action. But a lot of times they can't do it. There's something holding them back. I know, and that it's what's happening in your subconscious mind, because the subconscious holds and drives 95% of all that we feel and all of our behaviors. So what do you think would be, if you could give some advice, what do you think would be a really good thing people can do? Like when they have these big dreams and they want to do these things, but they literally can't move. What would you suggest?
The place that I started was listening to other people's stories. And I, found either some podcasts or joined some support groups that was really hard to put myself out there in a couple of these different ways, but starting to hear how other people took the steps, what those steps looked like, where they started more than anything, because it showed me I wasn't alone in that desire of wanting something different, and that stuck feeling, that whatever was holding me back was, yes, that subconscious programming that I had, but the follow-up fear of, I'm going to be alone out there. I have no idea how I'm going to accomplish it. And getting these stories into my head, whether that was reading blogs online or even once I even slightly shared my story with people, others would start sharing their stories. And that was really huge for me, because when I saw other people had overcome their trauma, have done the work, and continue to do that as they progress in their businesses and their lives, it showed me that it was possible for me, because I also had this very dark time in my life where I didn't believe that I could achieve not only this big dream that I had, but live a day without crying for at least a portion of the day. So getting connected with people who had that same experience and then watching and listening to their stories of how they moved through it was really powerful to kind of get me over the hump. But it wasn't until I started that deep subconscious reprogramming work that helped those triggers go away, right? That made me start believing, seeing myself in the same light that I wanted other people to see themselves in.
Wow. So I love that, because, I talk about support, and support is so important, not feeling isolated, not feeling alone, feeling like other people understand you, and getting your experiences validated. And that's what you did, but you sought it out for yourself. You didn't just wait for it to come to you. You started sharing your story. You started listening to podcasts and seeking it out so that you could obtain that for yourself. So I think that's kind of the takeaway here is like, you got to take action. Like you got to move yourself and, start listening to those podcasts, get on Facebook groups, reach out to people who have similar experiences or similar stories to help you realize that it's possible, because that's what you said, it showed me that it was possible. And that's a huge piece of this too, because if we don't believe truly that it's possible, then our behavior is going to be, we're going to stay where we are, right? If it is impossible in our minds, we're never going to take action to move forward. But if we know that, oh, wait a minute, there's someone who experienced the same thing I did, and someone who experienced the same trauma I did, or the same failures that I did, or whatever that might be, but then they actually were a success, or they actually feel better, or they actually created this new business, or wrote that book, or became that lawyer they wanted to, right? You see that in other people, and you understand that it's possible for yourself, right? Because if they can do it, why can't I do it? Now, I will say, I think that's one piece, but then there also comes, we've got to get to, like what you said, the subconscious piece of it, because if we don't recognize and understand, aren't aware of what's going on inside of our brains, then it's not going to matter what you think is possible, because your actions still will not move you in that direction. Your actions will still keep you stuck there. So when you had said, earlier in the conversation about, people having self-doubts and not believing in themselves and thinking they need this or that in order to be successful. If we didn't have those beliefs, right, we would say, well, what would be possible for your life if you didn't believe that you couldn't make it, or if you didn't believe that you would be a failure, if you didn't believe you, were supposed to be in this particular role, what would be possible for you? And I think that's really, really key here is, one, showing yourself it's possible, but then taking one step further and figuring out what it is that's blocking you from taking that action, because we all know the subconscious mind runs 95% of the show. And if we're not working in the subconscious, we're not using the greatest strength of our mind to accomplish the things that we need to, because that 5% is the willpower method. And we all know how that turns out. So,
Allison, this brings up an interesting thought, because we're talking about the people who, have been in these toxic environments and have been beat down mentally and emotionally. But one of the things that we haven't talked a lot about is the people who are been successful or societally successful, right? That if you work really hard, if you do these certain things, achieve these certain things, that is a whole nother place to at least explore. Because for me, I had this very, what would be considered successful career, even though I didn't have a lot of self-confidence. I was dealing with these hard emotional things, but my job on the outside looked like I had it all figured out, or like I had achieved something that society, my parents, my teachers, my employers said I was supposed to achieve. But I wanted something different. And it took work. It took the support and encouragement of these people, these mentors in my life, to follow that like dream. And so I don't want to dismiss that for people who are experiencing that, who have maybe good jobs, but also are dealing with these emotions, but want to pivot, want to go a different direction. Because I remember how hard it was to tell my family that I was going to do something different, to tell my peers and my team that I was going to leave and start a new career. And part of that was dealing deeply with that subconscious, with that programming that told me if I left this place, I would be a failure.
Wow.
And having to build up that confidence and resilience was a huge part of my ability to be able to do that.
Do you feel like there was fear of, what other people might think, or like what other kinds of emotions were coming up for you when you thought about that? Because that's a really good point. There are people out there who have successful careers, have businesses, are doing things that they want to do, but maybe aren't really their main driver, or aren't really fully fulfilled. So what do you think were other emotions that you were experiencing when you were getting ready to make that shift?
So first I remember feeling like I was going to be putting myself and my family in danger because I was taking a financial risk by leaving a stable job with a stable salary to take the leap into entrepreneurship. So those people that want to write a book or go back to school, or start their own businesses, even if it's change tracks on a career in which may lead to a lesser paying job for a little while they're growing into it. So that fear was huge for me because I think that actually works all the way back to my parents. And we talked about that generational cultural stuff. They came to this country with sort of this fear, and that was in the programming I got as a child. They had to do the work. They did the work to grow a successful business and do all these things, but it kept being put into my brain, like, you need safety, you need a stable job, you need to do things. It doesn't matter if you don't like what you're doing or if you want to try something different, as long as you provide for your family. And so that was a huge thing for me to work through. And having two young children, on the other side, one of the motivators was like, do I want my kids to see me cry every day? Do I want them to have that memory of me? And while I'm reading them books at night, tears rolling down my face because my nervous system had been so overactive from these years of bullying and being pushed to overwork and do things that I didn't really feel that were aligned for me, but were the sacrifices I felt I had to make to deal with these things in order to provide that stability. So that was a huge piece. I also did enjoy the work that I did with the actual clients, customers in that job. And I felt like if I left, then for some reason, these clients wouldn't be served as well as when I was with them. Or that the peers that I had worked so hard to build a community in that job, that they would be disappointed in me or think less of me. Actually, there was two rounds of this. One of it was they would think less of me, and the other one was that who am I voice, which said, oh, so you think you're better than this? Like you can climb out of the pit of doom?
Yeah, isn't that interesting? So there's fear and there's guilt and there's that imposter syndrome and all of that happening in everybody who has ever been experiencing these kinds of things can relate to what you're saying, right? I can relate to what you're saying, that that you do these questions in your head, like what if, or when you're talking about like your family and that programming and them saying the things that they said and you experiencing what you experienced as a kid, like it's all about safety and security and having financial money, regardless of if you love your job or hate it, right? That's the most important thing. Well, some people have that programming just like you. And of course, if you have that, why would you do anything different? Why would you take risks? Why would you try new things? Why would you? You wouldn't. You would maintain that same mentality to keep you safe, right? Your brain just wants to keep you safe. And if you think that's going to keep you safe, then of course you're going to do that. But what if we change the story? What if we argue for a different type of statement? Like, what if you believe taking risks is the only way to succeed, right? What if that was in your programming? And I think sometimes people get so stuck in these thought patterns that they don't really consider or think that something else could also be true, or something else could be possible. Like what else is possible? Showing your mind a different story. So I'm really curious, you had said you had a mentor kind of helped you, you had support, you were taking action and doing all these things to try to move yourself, and you had motivators because you didn't want your kids seeing you crying and things like that. But what do you think was the real tipping point for you when you were like, enough is enough, I'm totally going to do this, where you were just all in?
Honestly, when I think to the moment that I said it's time, I realized that what I was living in that moment was not the life I wanted to live in the future. And I, at that moment, did not even know about subconscious reprogramming. It was probably a year before I really did learn. So the work that I did to get from that moment to leaving was about 9 months. And then still I hadn't found it. So I had taken the sleep. I just knew I didn't want what I had. I was fortunate to have, like I said, those mentors that just encouraged me to keep taking steps forward. But it was once I started learning this stuff around subconscious reprogramming that I was like, I could have gotten here so much faster if I had done this work, if I knew about this. And I didn't know about this because at that time, the environment that I was in, the culture I was part of, that's not the kind of stuff that we would have ever talked about.
Yeah.
So it was just believing in myself enough to start that journey, to just, whether it's believing in myself or believing that I wanted more and I saw people out there had it. So I had to believe that there was a way for me to have it too. And like I said, if I had figured out the subconscious stuff a year prior, I would be so much farther ahead. But I'm also grateful for the way that it came into my life and that all the things I explored beforehand, because it showed me how much resilience I built up, how much, how much I learned in that season. But I very much then, I had to trust that whatever I was going to do next, I needed to take different action, bigger action, because the dream I wanted to work towards was so much bigger. And in that moment, I just knew I had to do something.
Yeah, that's amazing. I want to talk a little bit more about that vision, right, of the future. It's interesting that you said, if you had just learned this like a year before, wow, I have clients tell me that all the time. I've had clients say that to me like, oh my gosh, I wish I knew this 20 years ago, and I felt like that too. It was like I had spent so many years in therapy trying to change my emotions, trying to change my behaviors, and nothing ever really worked like this, because it's like once your eyes have been open to it, you see the world completely differently. Like you can't even like judge people anymore. Like you literally like, I know this is your programming. I know this is why you can't take action. I know this is why you feel that way, or you believe that, or you think that. So yeah, I totally can resonate with that. The thing that I thought was really interesting about that pivotal moment for you was that you actually were able to see a vision of your future. So I think it's really, really important, right? That's one of the very first things that I do with my clients is creating that vision for your future. What do you want your future to be? So can you talk a little bit about that as far as, when you were thinking about what you want? Because I loved the little snippet that you said about, if other people had it, why can't I have it? Like, why are they creating these businesses and doing all these things that they love, but not me? So can you talk a little bit about the vision that you had for yourself?
Yeah. And this is where I would reiterate the value of a mentor, because it was that mentor who told me to start writing about my perfect life, right? What does my perfect day look like? What does my perfect week look like? Perfect year. And even if I didn't believe it, find a journal, safe place to write it, burn it afterwards if I had to, if I was so scared for people to hear that. But what's funny in this story is that the first version of this that I wrote was almost my current life. I had a corporate job, sort of, I worked 8 to 5, I had kids to take to daycare. But I was like, I just want to show work on time. I want to not cry in my office. And as I then went back to my mentor to talk through these things, she's like, is this really the life you want? And that was one of the first triggers or times in my life that was like, is this the life that I want? And that deep calling that I had was to do something different. And I was like, well, I mean, in my dream life, I would wake up, meditate, journal, do some start work at like 10, not have to be tied to any thing that I didn't want to do, but really have the freedom, both financially and with time. But I was like, I don't know how to do that. I don't know if that's possible. Do people actually live this kind of life? I've never seen that happen. And so then she told me, let's do this again and write out this life, whatever this dream life is that you want. And it was amazing how once I started writing about that and actually allowing myself to envision what my true dream life, my work would look like, like the way that I am with my family, all of the different things, how it started to show up and actually opportunities created themselves for that life to start becoming a reality. But when I first started talking and working with this mentor, I didn't even allow myself to believe that that was something I could have.
Wow. So how often and how many times have you done only do it twice, 2 times, or have you done it more often than that?
So that started about 2 years ago. And I actually now habitually, I'm on my 6th journal and start every journal by redoing that exercise now.
Wow, that's amazing.
And it's something that I have the clients that I work with do, because where we are today is right a point in time, and the direction that we are moving forward in, we can either intentionally choose that, or if we don't, we're just going to keep repeating what we're doing at the moment. And so I go through this exercise each time I open a new journal, and they last me actually only about 3 months, because I write a lot and subconscious reprogramming, right? We do that work. And it's so interesting because sometimes the vision is very similar, right? The other times, in maybe a couple in the last 2 years, when I started thinking, I want freedom of time and space. That is one of the values that I am trying to build up in my life and in my business. The direction that I had started taking was not quite giving me that. So I was like, okay, if this is what I want, how do I pivot at this moment to adjust and meet that goal that I have? So, a lot of us talk about, like, let's do this big visioning exercise and decide a path. And that's the one thing we're going towards. And for me, I did that. But instead of these specifics of I want this job and this salary and these things, I created this list of values. I wanted to, create great experiences for my family. That meant in time and in my presence and experientially and financially. And I talked about the freedom of time and space, and I always wanted to keep learning. And so these are sort of these like guardrails that don't change a lot from journal to journal. But over the last 2 years, as I started doing more personal and professional development, as I learned about what is possible, what different jobs look like, career options, what my own passion and calling was, and as I started to remember who I am through my own healing work, that vision has tweaked a little bit along the way, but so many new things have uncovered along the way that 2 years ago I wouldn't have thought were real for me, or didn't even have that idea. And now I'm like, yeah, that this is on my trajectory. I want this. And all along the way, I have been doing healing work, and I understand now that each new level of my life and my business is going to require a new version of me that has healed and released things that previously didn't allow me to believe that was possible for me.
Wow, that is such a great idea. Like, I love that you shared that because, well, a couple things. I love that you create that vision sort of, and knowing too that that vision changes, right? The vision isn't always going to be the same because your life changes, your kids get older, your relationships change, your businesses change, your opinions change, right? So keeping it a kind of a consistent pattern to just check in with yourself, right, is really, really important. I like to talk about like checking in with yourself for your like self-awareness. Like, do you have bad behaviors? Do you have things you want to change about yourself? What would other people, if you asked, say maybe you could improve? But I think this is really important too. It's the same thing. It's checking in with that vision, because today you could say, this is my vision, but in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, it could be completely different, especially if you're achieving your vision, right? Especially if you're already achieving it. Are you achieving it and stopping, or are you achieving it and achieving more? And that's really, really key, because if we're going to continue to level up, if we're going to continue to improve, continue to help people and enhance our lives and our families' lives and the people around us, that vision is going to change. So that's really, really exciting. And I'm going to try that, because I love the values piece and I do that for myself, but I haven't gone back and revisited that vision over and over again. And I'm going to add that, because I have a lot of journals like you do, but that's a good idea. Like every time you open a new journal, what's the first thing that you put in there? And it's getting to that vision, because keeping it in your sights, right? If you know the destination, it's a lot easier to figure out how to get there. But if you're just kind of wandering aimlessly and you don't know where you're going, right, it's just going to be like throwing spaghetti at the wall. So let's get to our values, figure out what they are, like you said, and then create the vision on that and keep revisiting it. So I love that. And I love the piece about, obviously, because my clients do this and I know yours do too, putting it on paper. Because if we don't put these things on paper, they're just kind of loose thoughts that are going around in our head. But putting it on paper sort of solidifies it. It makes it real. It makes it concrete. It's easier to see and process. And I don't know about you, but I've gone back and looked at my old journals and my old like subconscious reprogramming stuff. And I'm like, things that I've already conquered. And I'm like, I can't believe I ever thought that, or I ever believed that, like some of the like negative or limiting things. And I'm like, because I don't anymore, because I've shifted it, but it makes it really concrete when you do it. But also, like, looking back at it can be a little bit laughable. It can be like sort of giggly, like that is so silly. Like, how was that ever part of who I am? But that's the way reprogramming works. You know, we have to shift these things, change them, and help ourselves move forward to get to that vision, like you said. So I love that.
You know, one tip for your listeners is that now, for those of you that journal, when I know I'm within the last few pages of my journal, I actually intentionally flip back through and write out like a self-reflection of where I started when I started that journal to where I am in that moment. And in that subconscious work, it is amazing that I may be having a really bad day in that moment for whatever reason. My kids didn't sleep, or we were late, or whatever. I was hangry. That happens sometimes too. And I'm laying there, writing out like, wow. I remember the one, and very important one, where the first month I was like, I have no idea what I'm going to do to like pay to fund my family, to figure out of this business. I have no idea what I'm going to do. And 3 months later, I was delivering my first training because of the work that I had done through that. And I was like, oh my goodness, I can't believe that only in this short 3-month period, I made so much progress. And it helped reinforce the work that I had done. It helped me see, wow, I have made progress. And I like to go back in those old journals and really look at how I was feeling before I had done this work, how I feel now. And when I face that next challenge or something new starts coming up for me, I have that moment of like, I feel the emotions and I'm like, okay, let's go open up a journal and start the work, because I know how meaningful it is to helping me get to that next level.
Yeah. And a lot of times we don't give ourselves as much credit, like not on purpose, but we sort of forget like how far we've come. And I think that's a really important piece too, to getting us to that vision, is not forgetting about all the steps that have led you to where you are, right? It's just like you're saying, when you went back and you're like, wow, look what happened in these 3 months. I can actually see. It's sort of like if you went on a diet and you lost 50 pounds and you had a before and an after photo. Like, that's what it is. It's you're looking back and saying, holy moly, like I actually have record of this, instead of forgetting about all the work and all the practice and all the changes that have brought me to where I am. And so I think when we do that, it gives us a sense of confidence. It gives us some work, some, feelings of self-worth, because you can be proud of yourself. You can be like, wow, look what I actually did and accomplished. And I love that part. So I want to ask you a couple more questions here. And what do you think, because kind of pivoting from that, the self-worth and the lack of confidence, because a lot of people have that, again, from being emotionally abused, and they want so much more, right? Especially, like, I can remember thinking, like, I was a stay-home mom, and I loved being a stay-home mom. I loved being with my kids, but I always had this yearning to, like, help people and give back in some way, but I never had any way to do it until, obviously, I figured out I was being emotionally abused. And then it sort of was like the universe putting me on this path. But what do you think, as far as main areas to focus on for yourselves? Like, I don't know what you do in your coaching practice, but like, self-worth for me is one big one for people. But when it comes to moving your business, are there some other areas that you like to work with people?
Visibility and voice are two big things. Whether the people that I'm working with totally understand that is one of the things holding them back from moving their business forward. They say, well, I don't know Instagram, or I don't know how to do this thing. And once we start doing the work, because that's why we do the business strategy and the subconscious healing, because you don't want to be on Instagram. Like, your programming is holding you back from doing the things to maybe grow that online business, or to go to more networking meetings, or to apply for a job, right? That you might want, because something in your programming, in your history, in your experience has you feel unsafe of being visible. And that is a huge thing that I have been working with people about. Putting themselves out there, feeling safe to do it, and being more confident in doing that, so they can achieve what their goals are in their business. And when it comes to their voice, you think whether it's a business owner or someone who's promoting themselves, trying to get a promotion at a job, you have to talk about the good things that you've done in order to, or how your business serves other people. And so many people that I work with are such good givers, and so they're so good at helping other people, but to look at themselves and say, I am good at this, or I deserve to receive this, it like shuts them down. And once I start explaining to people how the subconscious works, and to talk about things like, do you think other people who are successful feel the same way about themselves as you do? And it just starts churning these ideas of like, oh, well, I see how this is connected now. So those two areas, visibility and voice, is really important at whatever thing you're trying to do. Talking about writing a book, if that's something that someone wants to do, to tell their story, but they've been shut down in talking and sharing their voice, that is a huge piece, not just about the self-worth, but to feel like the words that they say are valuable.
Right.
And that allowing themselves to be seen is safe.
Right. Yeah, I could totally see that. I love those two kind of core pieces, that the visibility and the voice, because if you're going to do something to reach a dream or achieve something that you really desire for your life after emotional abuse, right? If you've been isolated, if you've been controlled, if you've been told you'll never make it alone, and told you're not good enough and you can't do anything, right? I mean, even me, like, I wrote a book while I was with my abuser. I wrote a different book. Like, it is a science fiction book. It has nothing to do with anything, it's completely like, it's not a memoir or anything like that. It's literally a made up science fiction book. And I wrote it while I was with him, and he refused to read it. He literally would not read it. I said, and he read books constantly, like sci-fi books. And I said, I would love for your opinion. I would love for you to tell me like what you think about it. And he just refused to read it. So that really shattered my confidence, because I thought, gosh, this person who reads books, and I'm his wife, and he won't even read my own book that I wrote. So it's still sitting in a drawer somewhere here in my house. But, when you have things like that, that have sort of made you believe that you weren't capable or your voice shouldn't be heard, or, it does create that self-doubt, and it makes us fear, it makes us doubt, it makes us worry that we're not good enough. And if we can change that, exploring the questions, asking things like, well, why is it different for you than it is for someone else? Asking those really, really important questions that kind of get you thinking, it can shift some things inside of you and help you move yourself from point A to point B, take some action. Maybe it's just writing a blog, right? Maybe that's the very first step, writing a blog, putting it out there, seeing if people read it. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, but action, right? Taking little baby steps, get yourself a mentor, get yourself some support, start journaling, do one little thing. Like, that's what I always talk about. It's just one step at a time. And that's how we move ourselves forward. So I love, because I always ask this question of all my guests, what is something that is unique about you that not a lot of people know?
I really love to paint. I actually have this very creative part of me that I don't always nurture as much as I would like, but in the moments that I do, I am so fulfilled. And, maybe that's part of this whole creative journaling and expressing yourself in a different way. But there's something I love about the abstract ability to paint, whether it is, I'm not a great painter by any means, but there's something healing about it. There's something like releasing. And this is something that, interestingly, not even a lot of people in my personal life know. So
Really? Wow. Well, they're going to know now.
we're going to know now.
Well, I love that too, because I've always been an artist, like ever since I was really young. And I find that when you're drawing, painting, like things like that, you get into this sort of mind state. I don't know what to call it, but like you're really zen and really just like focused in, and like nothing else, like anything else could be going on and I won't notice it. If I'm sitting there painting or drawing or doing something like that, it's super relaxing to me. I know some people are like, ugh, like I would never do that. I can't draw to save my life. I can't paint. But if you look at it in a way, like even like abstractly, like you're not trying to like do a mural or, paint something like a face or something like that, if you don't feel comfortable with that, but you can literally just put paint on a piece of paper or on canvas and get yourself into sort of a zone, and it's super relaxing. So I love that too. So you and I have that in common. Thank you so much for being here. Is there anything else you want to share with our listeners before we head out?
I think I just want to remind everyone that normal people achieve big dreams too.
That's
and
amazing.
There's a moment in my life, there's a moment in so many of our lives where we don't feel like we can have that. And I hope to encourage your listeners to keep following that dream, because it's just a matter of time, a matter of action, and you're going to get there.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. Tell everyone where they can get in touch with you, if they want to work with you, or if they want to like connect with you on social media.
I spend a lot of time on Instagram. So my handle is I am Anna Nichols. Reach out to me, send me a DM, follow me so you can get some of the fun business and mindset tips that I send out there. And I'd love to connect with anybody.
Great. I'm going to put all of that information on the show notes in this podcast episode. So if you're looking to connect with Anna, feel free to click the links in there and you'll be directed to connect with her. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate all of the information that you've shared, all the tips and wisdom and little golden nuggets. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm so grateful to be here.
Thank you for being here with me today in the Emotional Abuse Recovery Podcast. I hope you found value here with me. If this podcast episode was helpful to you, I'd love for you to hit subscribe and leave me a review. My goal is to help you go from feeling stuck to set free. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook, and you can check out whentearsleavescars.com for more resources and information to help you with your own emotional abuse recovery. Until next time, here's to believing in